Today's session will be slightly different because I am going to draw on some information I came across, which I felt was very, very telling of where we are relationally in society today. I have included as part of this this session, I have included a link. The link is from The Guardian UK. It's an article produced by someone by the name of Lizzie Cernick. It was produced 2 days ago on the 18th of October 2021. The title of the article is "I Feel Hurt That My Life Has Ended Up Here." The article primarily focuses on women who are involuntarily celibate. In other words, female incels. And that is what I will try to shed some light on in the next few minutes. So I think it would be very, very useful to go to the description page, and you would find the link. Have a read through the article, because it would set the foundation to the conversation that I'm about to have. Let me begin by defining, for those who are not familiar with the word incel, let me begin by defining what that means. An incel is anyone or a group of people who are unable to find, secure a romantic or sexual partner, although they desire one. We define, or society defines, such people as involuntarily celibate. Now, I read the article and in many ways, I was moved, I was touched, but I was also sad. I was saddened by the contents in the article. I won't go through every section of the article, but I will like to specifically address 3 key parts of the article. Each of the 3 parts refers to 3 specific women. One by the name of Caitlin. Today's session, I will focus primarily on Caitlin. The second is Jane, and there's a third one, which is Elaine. Now, let me begin with Caitlin, and I'll move rather quickly. And I believe that perhaps for those of us who always come to the conversation in good faith, for those of us who begin any form of interaction with other people with an open heart and with an open mindset, I believe there is always room to grow, to learn, to evolve. And I hope that is something that this session can provide. I'll say this before I begin, that some of the things that I might discuss are sensitive topics and sensitive issues. I will be very honest as I can. I'll be very sincere, but I'll also, most importantly, be very truthful to the best of my ability, recognizing that sincerity and truthfulness are not synonymous terms. But I will be sincere and I will be truthful. The result of that would be that it might come across as though some of what I might say is insensitive. I can assure you, before I begin, My intention is to help. Winston Churchill once said that the truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it and ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is. So as you listen, I'd like you to keep an open mind. I hope this is useful to someone, whoever you may be. Now, one of the reasons I felt it was necessary to address this issue or this article is fundamentally because I believe that women have listened to other women for too long. And when it comes to issues or matters relating to the heart and matters relating to men or people of the opposite sex, sometimes it's useful to listen to the people within that other category for whom perhaps you have an issue with. I believe for too long, and especially since the 1970s, women have listened to women, other women, and have in many ways completely excluded the wisdom of men, the discernment of men, the opinions of men. And the consequence of that is that in matters relating to the heart, I find it very, very perplexing that so many women still do not understand men. Despite the fact that men have not necessarily changed in the last almost 100 years. There has been a lot more changes within the female area, whether that be in relation to responsibilities, rights, obligations, desires, goals, dreams. We've seen more changes from the female perspective, and rightly so. But men over the last 100 years have remained relatively consistent in who they are. Now, I say that simply as a starting point because I believe that this article is very telling in how much women misunderstand men and how much women have been misled and have been sold a dream, a false dream, a dream for which so many innocent, good, kind, loving women are paying a price for an ideology, for a value system that wasn't well understood at the early stages of their lives. But now, the consequences of such ideologies, unfortunately, have been bearing and have brought forth much fruit. Unfortunately, negative, in a negative fashion. Now, let me begin with sections, and I'll read out some parts of this article. Now, let me begin with this. The article says, Caitlin, who is 39 years old, does not call herself a femcel. A femcel is simply a female incel. Caitlin, who is 39 years old, does not call herself a femcel. But she hasn't had sex for almost 8 years and doesn't think she will find another sexual partner. In quote, I am not conventionally attractive, and I never get approached by men, she says. They don't look at me. I have had therapy to try to address these issues, but dating feels like a barren wasteland. It's worse as I get older, because I have missed out on that short window to marry and have a family. Now let me just stop and just address 3 or 4 very, very important sections in that statement. Number one, let's begin with her age. Caitlin is 39 years old. So we're not referring to here a middle-aged woman. We're still looking at a relatively young lady. But keep that in mind. She says she has not had sex for almost 8 years. She doesn't believe that she will find another sexual partner. She defines herself as not conventionally attractive and doesn't get approached. She says men do not look at her or in her direction, but she has gone to therapy to address these issues. But she feels dating is like a barren wasteland. And as she gets older, she understands that it will get worse. But she makes a proclamation or a statement that I think is profound. And I share this simply because my goal is to help people become the best that they can be to reach their potential. I share this simply because I think this is a powerful lesson for younger women. Very powerful. She says, I have missed that short window to marry and have a family. I'm going to connect today's session, and my intention will be to use this as a backdrop for a wider conversation in relation to relationships. Today I will deal with Caitlin. In the following sessions I'll deal with the other two ladies and specifically their experiences. Let me begin by saying this. I am supportive of the pre-1970s and the 1965 feminist movement. But I believe that the post-1970s feminist movement and the various variations of the feminist movements that we have today have done more harm than good to women. Primarily, pre-1970s, it was all about recognizing that women were not allowed to express and fulfill their potential. And that was fundamentally flawed and wrong. And that under the law, we are all equal. And therefore we demand and we should command and we should be given equal rights. Under the eyes of God, there is a level of equality in the metaphysical state, meaning we are all just spirits. And the pre-1970s movement was about ensuring that women were given the opportunity to show that they were equal citizens and to demonstrate that their value was not what was defined by men. For that reason, I support the movement. The post-1970s movement, unfortunately, took a mind of its own. The empowerment of women, which I support, was done in such a way that some of the values and the value system that women had were thrown away. There is a saying that you should not throw away the baby with the bath water. And I feel that the post-1970s and the present feminist movement, they continually and constantly keep throwing away the baby with the bath water. And a lot of the values that women had were put aside without stopping and saying, what are we going to replace those values with? And what function did those values serve? Now, let me bring that back to Caitlin's story. The reason I'm referring to this is because she says she missed on a very short window to marry and have a family. Every woman has a very short window to marry and have a family. That is not a statement from a man. That is a biological statement. Nature demands that. And so I'm going to very quickly go through a number of things, some of my personal perspectives. Again, these are my views. So do not accept everything that I say. Do not reject everything you hear. And if you can, try not to neglect some of the statements I'll make. Take the information and as you listen, ask yourself one simple question. Can this information, although I disagree with the tone, the timing, the delivery, the message, can it help me become the better version of myself? And can it help me achieve my goals and dreams? And most importantly, is it true? And not is it true in relation to your specific anecdotal experience or your life, but is it true for the general population? Now, let's start with one thing. The story goes on to say, and this is quite important, Caitlin never tells people that she is celibate because it makes her feel abnormal and inadequate. She says, I feel a lot of anger and hurt that my life has ended up this way. I struggle to cope with the fact that I may never find a partner. She says, society makes it harder because after a certain age, people tend to pair off and form their own insular units, and life gets lonely for single people. Now, powerful, powerful statement. Powerful statement. It goes on. Although Caitlin is not morally opposed to casual sex, it is not an experience that feels right to her or for her. She has had 2 short-term relationships which ended in a heartbreak. There is a popular notion amongst incels and the incel community, and even in wider society, that women are privileged because they can get sex at any time. Not only is that untrue, as many women will testify, but also, as Caitlin points out, not all sex is enjoyable. She says, in quote, generally men who are not in a relationship with you do not make it pleasurable or a pleasurable experience. The risk of rejection afterwards is high, which makes sex even less enjoyable. Now, it says, Caitlin is aware that men also struggle with self-esteem issues linked to their appearance, but believes the pressure is greater for women. She says, in quote, I am not especially drawn to someone's looks or height. I prefer to get to know someone and develop an attraction. But I feel that a man who doesn't find me attractive straight away would never learn to become attracted to me. I see lots of beautiful women dating men who are not good looking, but rarely the other way around. Men have more ways to attract a partner than looks. Now, the article goes on to say, appearance-based discrimination, which is termed lookism by femcel communities, is not the only reason that some women struggle to find sexual partners. The risk of male violence has always been a concern, but the semi-anonymous nature of apps and apps-based dating has increased these fears for many women. Now, that's where we stop with the article for Caitlin. And this is where I start my section of the conversation. Now, here's the first thing that I would say. When you read Caitlin's story, what struck me was she sounds like a great woman, a kind woman, a loving woman. She sounds like a woman who was raised traditionally with great values. The question is, why has she failed at 39, which is not even up to middle age? Why has she failed? In many ways, I think this would help. Let me begin by explaining that there is a difference between value and price. Now, I'm going to use economic terms. First of all, I would say, women, ladies, in order for you to understand men, you must understand and recognize that men are cost-benefit calculators. So we look at things rationally. We look at things through the prism of basic economics. What is the cost? What is the benefit? And price value is a simple way through which we do this calculation. For some men, it's done automatically, it's done subconsciously. For some other men, it's done more in a methodological fashion. Now, what does that mean? The price of something is what you pay. The value is what you get. The first thing to understand is that, ladies, your value can be understood in what I call 4 different categories. Now, this is perhaps where there is a disconnect between the male's perspective of dating and the female's perspective of dating. From a man's perspective, we look at your value under 4 different categories. The first category is what we call your EIV, which is your economic intrinsic value. Your economic intrinsic value. Now, your economic intrinsic value has to do with your education, your achievements during your education phase. It has to do with your professional status, whether you have a job or whether you have a career, and your achievements within that professional industry. It has to do with how much you earn. It has to do with how much wealth you have, or how much wealth your family has, some of which you will inherit. It has to do with your intelligence, and in many ways, how street smart you are, your common sense. All of those specific ingredients, when put together, create what we call your ability to generate and create wealth economically. That is what you bring to the table. So the first category is your economic intrinsic value, what I call EIV. The second is what we call your sexual marketplace value, your SMV. Your sexual marketplace value is very different to your economic value. Your sexual marketplace value has to do with how we, remember this is from the eyes of men, because we men, you can think of us like customers, and you can think of yourself as a company providing a product or a service. So you cannot look through your eyes. You have to look through the eyes of the market and through the eyes of the customers. Best way to imagine this would be to consider a product and a consumer. And you have a producer. The producer produces the product, but it's the consumer who decides the value of the product and whether the product is of and is deserving of their time, money. And so, as a woman, you have to look through the prism of a man's perspective in order to understand what you're doing right, what you could do differently, and what you should change. Your sexual marketplace value, SMV, is very specific. It has to do with your physical attributes. It has to do with your weight. It has to do with your height. It has to do with your level of attractiveness. It has to do with your fitness level. So, when a man sees a woman, the first thing we do, we're very visual. Men are visual. Ladies, please, if there's one thing I'd like you to take away from today's session, please remember this. Men are visual. That does not make us cheap. That does not make us superficial. That does not make us shallow. That makes us men. And we haven't changed in the last 8,000 years. And we will not change in the next 8,000 years. It's written into our DNA. This is nature. This is biology. Men are visual. So, in relation to your sexual marketplace value, the first thing we do when we see a lady is we evaluate the lady based on her face, her body, her presence, and overall we say she is attractive. And this doesn't sound nice, but we do score women. So we say she's a 1, she's a 2, she's a 3, she's a 9, she's a 10. Everyone has a score. Now, your sexual marketplace value is often separated into two subsections. The first has to do with the features that are inherent and the features for which you're responsible for maintaining and improving. So, for example, you might be 5'11". Your height is incidental to who you are. It's inherent. You did nothing to earn that. Your face, depending on the shape of your face, is, providing you haven't done any enhancements, that is incidental. That is inherent. There is nothing you can do about that. However, your size, your weight, your dress size, the shape of your body, there are things you can do to improve your attractiveness based on your body. And so men separate those two. What we usually judge based on is whether you have had the discipline to control the controllable. So what have you done to enhance, to improve the one thing you've been given, which is your physical body, and the one thing that you will never get a replacement for. So we judge based on what you do in terms of whether you exercise, whether you eat in a healthy way. And so what we see, we make a judgment, a value judgment, I have to say. You could say it's a wrong thing to do, but that is what happens. But we make a judgment as to whether we believe you have discipline, whether we believe you're worthy of our time, because in many ways your appearance communicates to the world the level of esteem you have towards yourself, but also communicates to the world what you think of the people you interact with. If you do not take care of yourself well, you're in effect saying, the world has to take me as I am. And the world doesn't have to. The world doesn't owe you any patience, forgiveness. The marketplace is very, 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 you could say harsh. The marketplace does not care about your struggles, your history, your experiences. The market simply says, my role is to compare you to other people. And my role is to give you a score. I don't want to know about the history of what has happened or what did not happen. You may have had a child. You may have had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kids. The market says, all I see is the visual, and I judge based on the visual. And for that reason, your sexual marketplace value is the most important part of the value of a woman on first impressions. So when someone meets you for the first time, from a distance or up close, they make a judgment on your sexual marketplace value. And this judgment is made by men to women. So let me just go through, in summary of your SMV, your weight, your size, your height. So, for example, I'll use myself as an example so you can understand. Let's assume that I am 4'9". If I lift too much weight, or if I allow myself to get really bloated, then I look round. If I am 5'11" and I let myself to be bloated, or I put on too much weight, I also look somehow more like an egg shape. On the other hand, if I am, which I am, 6'2", if I have an athletic body, lean muscles, and broad shoulders, a proportional body, then I look more like a letter I. And to the marketplace, based on my height, the market judges me based on my weight in proportion to my height. So for someone who weighs 95 kg and is 6'2" or 6'2.5", you're considered to be proportionately acceptable based on your height compared to someone else who also weighs 95 kg but is 5'2". The BMI, if you go to the website, NHS's website, you can see that I will be categorized as being healthy if my weight is somewhere just in my weight is more around, say, 88, 18, 89. The BMI calculates based on my height and my weight as being physically fit. On the other hand, if my weight was 97, 98, 100, irrespective of whether I have lean muscles or no muscles, based on that height, the BMI says I'm overweight. For someone who is 5'2", same weight, the BMI says you're obese. That is just the reality. This is just, there's no emotion attached to that. So your sexual marketplace value is the first impression that men have of you, and we score you. Your fitness, your beauty, whether you're physically fit, and all of that, when you bring all of that together, that gives you a value. You could be a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5. Now, I'll come back to things that affect such a value. The third is what we call your non-sexual marketplace value, NSMV. This particular category has more to do with your femininity, how feminine you are, your traditional values, your attitude, your temperament, your playfulness, your personality, how you express yourself, and we can see your self-image. In the same way, your non-sexual marketplace value also identifies whether you have daddy issues, whether you have confidence issues, whether you have self-concept that is very poor, a self-image that is weak. All of that adds to your non-sexual marketplace value. Are you aggressive? Are you very hard to get along with? And that comes with a score. So you might find someone who, and in this case, let me go back to Caitlin. From everything that I've seen, this appears to be a lady who has traditional values. And I say that, for example, because she states very, very, very eloquently that she's not morally opposed to casual sex, but it's not a feeling that is right for her. What you hear here is someone expressing how they were raised. She was raised, and what she's looking for is intimacy and connection, and a partner. And you could say, well, she's quite feminine. You could say she's got traditional values. You could even say that she's coming across with the right attitude. She's not blaming the whole world. So Interestingly, Caitlin would have a high, although I haven't met her, but from what I've seen, it would appear that she doesn't have a very low non-sexual marketplace value. So she has a higher non-sexual marketplace value than she does a sexual marketplace value. And number 4 is your reproductive value or your fertility value. I call this your RPV. This has to do with your age. It has to do with your youth. It has to do with, in many ways, this will cut slightly deep. How many kids you've had, if you have. It has to do with even if you've had abortions in the past. In many ways, what we're looking at here is your ability to fulfill the role that only a woman can fulfill, which is to reproduce life. The younger you are, the higher your value in terms of your reproductive value. The older you are, the lower your value. Now, this will take me into what I call the age categorization. And this is very useful for me to explain so that most women understand how this works from a man's perspective. But your reproductive value deals with your ability to reproduce life and the quality of the life you can reproduce. So we're looking at your youth, your womb, meaning your fertility and how secure it is. For example, it could even go as far as if you're a virgin, which means you haven't had any sexual encounters. You're still untouched. Now, 4 different categories of a woman's value. Let me summarize before I move on to the age categorization, because I think the age categorization is something most women need to understand. The first was your economic intrinsic value, your EIV. The second, your sexual marketplace value, or your sexual market value, which is your SMV. The third was your non-sexual marketplace value, which is your NSMV. And number 4, and the final, is your reproductive value, or your fertility value, which is your RPV. Now, let me bring all those 4 together. But before I do, ladies, there are 2 of those 4 categories that are the most important when it comes to dating and first impressions. This is something most women do not understand. Men, we're visual. We're cost-benefit calculators. We think based on your value, and we think about what price we're willing to pay to acquire. And forgive me for using that word, but that is what happens. The amount of money we're willing to spend to obtain that value, the amount of time we're willing to expend to obtain your value, the amount of resources we're willing to put forward to obtain your value. It is an exchange. Now, I'm not referring to casual relationships. I'm referring to where people are looking for meaningful long-term relationships. You invest time in exchange for a relationship to build an understanding, to build a friendship. So there's an exchange that takes place. And so men, generally, we think in relation to what are we getting compared to what do I have to pay. There are 2 parts of those 4 categories that are the most important. The first is your sexual marketplace value. The second is your reproductive value. Those 2 account, from a man's perspective, this is very, very important. Those 2 account for more than 80% of the first impression a man has of a woman. Once we've gone past the first impression and we've started some form of communication, your non-sexual value ranks 3rd, because that's where we start to evaluate you from the perspective of how feminine you are, whether you have traditional characteristics or values, whether you were raised in a good family, because a man is always thinking about finding the right mate who he can reproduce with, and who can raise his kids in the best way possible. And that has a lot to do with how the woman was raised. Was she raised in a feminine way? Was she raised in a traditional way? For example, can she cook? Can she clean? Does she understand the various aspects of womanhood? Does she know how to raise a family? Did she witness, as part of her upbringing, the collaboration between a man and a woman? And as part of that witness, did she see how to manage difficult situations that usually happen between a male and a female? How to put the needs of the institution of marriage above selfish needs of both the man and the woman, or the parents. She sees. Did she see? Did she have a role model? Did she have someone as part of her upbringing that taught her how to be a wife, that taught her how to be feminine, that taught her how to be patient, that taught her how to be the one that holds the family together? So men, we score that very highly, and that is the third. Once we've gone past the very first initial, experience of you visually, and we get past that to the communication phase, what we're trying to assess is whether your non-sexual marketplace value is attractive enough. The least important to a man, and I say this specifically to men of certain socioeconomic level. This may not be applicable to all men, but for men above a certain level, your economic intrinsic value, which means your education, your ability to work hard, your profession, your academic qualifications, your professional qualifications, they mean absolutely nothing to certain men in certain economic groups. And the reason is very simple. The men believe wholeheartedly that they are responsible for providing the resources, and it is their responsibility to provide for you. So they are not looking for someone to help provide the resources. So your education, whether you went to Oxford University or Cambridge, whether you worked for a Fortune 100 company, whether you worked for, in the UK, the best investment bank, it means absolutely nothing to us. And I'll speak here using myself as an example. I genuinely cannot remember either dating or conversing with a woman when I was interested in what she did from an economic intrinsic perspective. My role is to be the provider, and I gladly do that. And so, using Caitlin's example in the comments that were made, one of the things that struck me very hard, was she comes across as an intelligent, educated woman, but she's looking for men, and she's hoping that men would select her using the same criteria that she selects men. And I think that's the first mistake women make. Now with that said, let me say something before I move into the age categorization. Ladies, if the two most important categories of your value, which I've just said is your sexual marketplace value and your reproductive value, if those two are the most important, and I believe they are, the question will be, can you enhance or improve your value with time? I'll say something that I hope this comes across in the right way. Ladies, your value to the marketplace and to men in the market decreases with time. Now, this is not an easy thing to hear. The younger you are, the more valuable you are to a man. The older you are, the less valuable you are to a man. Now, I'm not referring to a specific man in your life. To your family, your value increases. To your spouse, your value increases. To your children, your value increases. But in the marketplace doesn't care about, and has not actually experienced, and has not been a beneficiary of all of your education and all of the things you've done to increase your overall value. So the marketplace simply judges you based on two very important criteria. The first, your sexual marketplace value. The second, your reproductive value. Both values decrease with time. Now this brings me to the age categorization, and I think this is useful. Now, Caitlin is 39 years old. Now keep that in mind. I'm going to give you four age categories. And these age categories, as far as men are concerned, I should say men of an age where they can actually be married. So we say marriageable age. They only care about these four specific categories. And when I say men, recognize that there are exceptions to everything I've said so far, but the exception does not prove the rule. And I'm making generalizations, but these generalizations work for the general population. There might be exceptions, and I accept that. The first category is between the age of 18 and 22, 5 years. Category 2 is between 23 and 27, 5 years. Category 3 is between 28 and 32, 5 years. And category 4 is between 33 and 35, 3 years. 4 categories. From a man's perspective, those are the only categories we look at, especially men who are looking for a life partner or to get married. In the main, age group between 36 and 40 is another 5 years. But people in that age group already, from the age 35, that's where you start high risk pregnancy. So I'm going to connect your sexual marketplace value with your reproductive value. Now, this age categorization connects those two value systems, your sexual marketplace value and your reproductive value. Ladies and women, your value is the highest between age 18 and 22 from a sexual marketplace perspective, because you have the virtue of youth, beauty, the lowest sexual history. Some of you are still virgins. From a fitness point of view, you're the most attractive, simply because you still have that youthful look, the plumpness of your skin, the radiance of your skin. There's something about a woman between 18 and 22. She still has that innocence. For that reason, your value is the highest in terms of your sexual marketplace value. Now, if a woman, and I'm going to move from sexual marketplace value now to reproductive value or your fertility value, within that same age group, anyone who goes and sits down with an obs and gynae, you will be told that between 18 and 22 is the most fertile period of a woman. That's where you have the most fertile eggs. You have the most eggs and the highest quantity and the highest quality of eggs. For that reason, your value from a reproductive perspective to men is seen as the highest. Next age group is between 23 and 27. Now, let me go back one step. Between 18 and 22, that is the point where most women have no understanding or comprehension of how valuable they are. This is where when women want to, they go to universities or colleges and they party, they drink, they have a good time, they travel the world. And sadly, this is a time when women, for those who are not careful, devalue themselves by more than 50%, especially those who actually have unwanted pregnancies and become mothers. Um, and we've made a mistakes society, and this goes back to the whole the feminism, failure of feminism, because it encouraged women to behave as poorly as men. When men were behaving very poorly, it also encouraged women to be selfish and put themselves first, to enjoy life, to strive for success, put their careers first. It encouraged women not to define themselves as women, but to define themselves as people, and people who could do whatever they wanted. For that reason, most women between the age of 18 and 22 are not aware that that is the most important part of their value journey, both sexual marketplace and reproductive value. One mistake, having a baby within that age period, can reduce your entire value by more than 70%, because men generally do not want to raise other men's kids. And so keep that in mind. The second group is between 23 and 27. But here is the important part. Between 18 and 22, that's usually when we go to college or university. Let's say you have no desire to think of everything in relation to relationships at that age. You just want to be your young self. Think about this. You've been waiting to become an adult. You've turned 16 and you just want to enjoy life. Keep in mind that between 18 and 22, that age period represents, now think about this, between age 18 and 35, from a man's perspective and from a biological perspective, that is your value, especially from a reproductive perspective. You have, say, 100% of your value. But between 18 and 22, 5 years of the 18 years means if you don't maximize and use that time well, you waste 28% of your entire value, blown away. So for example, let's say you party too much between 18 and 22, and between 23 and 27, you just graduated, you just started to work, you're living a good life, you've just moved to the city, you're having your multiple boyfriends and partners, and believe you have all the time. And your intention is not to get settled down until maybe 28. By 27, at the end of 27, you have wasted 56% of your overall reproductive value. 56%. Your OBGYN, your obs and gynecologist will tell you that the quality of your eggs would have deteriorated and the quantity of eggs would have deteriorated. It tends to happen that most women delay the whole process of choosing a life partner, and they delay that process until their 30s. Now here's where it gets sad. Between 28 and 32, that is the third category. You lose another 28%. So for those who have not found their partner by age 32, you've had 18 years all the way up to 32 years, which is 15 years. You've used 84% of your reproductive value and all the time. So that means between the age 33 and 35, all you have left is 16% of your value from a reproductive perspective. Now, the same principle applies with your sexual marketplace value. So you can be a very attractive woman, you could be a very, very beautiful woman, fit, personable, but let's say you're 36. Men generally do not look for wives, except they're hoping that they can gain something from the union, which is to reproduce. Otherwise, men are happy to just have partners. So if a man is looking to pick a woman, the first thing he thinks about is, okay, well, do I want a spouse, a wife? If the answer is yes, one of the very early questions we ask is, how old is she? Because we're trying to understand if she's still within a certain safety period within her reproductive value life. If she's 36, she's already in high risk pregnancy. When you start to date a woman at 36 or 37, let's say it takes a whole year before both of you decide to be committed to each other, and let's say you start trying to have a child, you can still have a child, but any good, obs and gynae will tell you that about 40 years, from 39, it's really, really recommended that you do not have kids, because it gets really complicated, both for the woman and for the child. So keep that in mind. Now, what does that mean in terms of scoring? Let me give you just an idea of a scoring perspective. From your reproductive value, if you're between 18 and 22, men will score you something in the region of between 8, 9, or a 10, because you're the most fertile. Some of you are still virgins. So we're getting virgins, we're getting women who do not have very high body counts, we're getting women who have not had complications in relation to all the sexual issues that we experience as part of the process. You perhaps haven't had issues in relation to abortions and all of that stuff. And so men score you very, very highly. Between age 23 and 27, which is where most men really want to pick a woman from, especially men who are between the age of, say, 30 and, say, 42, 43, we score you somewhere in the region of between 8 and 9, because we still think, okay, well, she's gone through her early stage and now she's maturing, but she still has so much more time. But recognize that the first stage, which is 18 to 22, you've used about 28% of your value, reproductive value. And in the second stage, by 26, you've used up roughly 40% of your value. So we start to score you, give you less scores the older you get. A woman who is 33 to 35, unfortunately, you only have 16% of your value left. Now, you might be thinking, where is this percentage coming from? It's very simple. Between 18 and 35, you have 18 years. So, in the first stage, 5 years, simply 5 divided by 18. In the second stage, 23 to 27, 5 divided by 18. In the final stage, 33 to 35, you only have 3 years. That is 16%. And in that age group, men score you very low. We score you between 4 and 5, because we think the best we might get from you, a woman who is in 35, could be only one child. And therefore, for the risk we're taking, we score you very low. Now, that is simply to give you an idea of how we do the scoring in relation to your reproductive value. Now, in relation to the sexual marketplace value, unlike what people think, it is not subjective. Believe you me. A man might give you a score, but men score through the eyes of other men. So, for example, a woman who is, say, for example, an 8 has to be scored as an 8 across multiple men. It is not subjective. It is objective. You could have subjective characteristics, but the marketplace is an objective measuring system. The marketplace weighs your sexual marketplace value. How? Your height, your weight, your intrinsic characteristics, and your non-intrinsic characteristics. And there are methods. You can look online and you can see how people's faces are chosen. There are some women who are very beautiful naturally, and there are some women who are beautiful through enhancements. But men generally judge based on your natural beauty. How you look first thing in the morning, when you haven't put on all your makeup, that is the look. That is how we judge you. So it's not based on what you look like when you've glammed up. It's what you look like before you get out of the bed. First thing in the morning, no makeup on, with your natural hair, natural attributes, no enhancements. We judge you at that state. Similarly, in terms of your height, we look at your height. The shorter a woman is, and by short I'm referring to 5 feet and below, the less attractive she is. But interestingly, the taller the woman is, the less attractive she is. And by tall I'm referring to women who are from 5'8" and above. The less attractive she is. The ideal in the UK, the ideal height for women from a man's perspective is 5'5", 5'5", 5'4". There have been several polls taken, and this is what men have said they prefer. This is not a subjective perspective. This has nothing to do with my preferences. This is simply, over the many years, men have been asked the same question, the same way women have been asked the same question. As a matter of fact, the ideal height for women in the UK for men is 5'9". Is fluctuated in some years to 5'10". And for women, men prefer women who are between 5'4" and 5'5". On the average, that's the preferred height. So for example, myself, someone like myself, I'm 6'2". That means, based on the marketplace, women prefer men who are slightly shorter than I am. That's just the reality. I don't fight it. Similarly, if you're below 5 foot, you're 5'2", 5'1", you are at a disadvantage. So that marks you down. The next thing is then how attractive your features are, And there are so many ways, I don't have to go into the detail, but one useful way, ladies, would be to, this is not easy, so please forgive me, because this is a very sensitive topic we're covering. One easy way to do this would be to say, ladies, if you have any male friends and friends who are not sexually attracted to you, and friends who are not intimately attached to you, and friends or men who you're not related to, ask them to rank you, give you a score. And I think that would be a very useful way, and have multiple men do that, and that'll give you an idea. So for example, let me use the gym. I can bet a wager that if I walked into the gym and I were to gather all the men, and I asked all the men to score all the women in the gym from 0 to 10, you would find there is some consistency on the aggregate across women between, say, an 8 and a 9. And you would also find a consistency on the aggregate for women who are about 5 or 6 and below. So yes, it's subjective, but there is still an objective standard. And that goes with your weight. How, what do you weigh? Are you, do you look athletic? Do you look trim? Do you look after yourself? Do you have an athlete's physique? Proportionality in relation to your upper body, your mid body, your lower body, and your legs. All of that matters, and all of that gives you a score. Now, when you take the score from your sexual marketplace value and you look at the score from your reproductive value, both combined, usually averaged out, gives you your value as a woman from a man's perspective. And this is simply first impressions. Now, once we've gone past first impressions, then we can go to looking at perhaps your non-sexual marketplace value. And this has to do with how feminine you are, your attitude, has to do with whether you have traditional upbringing, traditional traits, traditional values. Now, all of that, I say all of that to make a point. And that is, what price are men willing to pay And by pay, I'm referring to time, resources, their lives, their presence. What price are men willing to pay for your value? Now, most men, like I said, are cost-benefit calculators. So we look to get more in value than we pay in price. As a woman ages, men are willing to pay less for the woman. Now, I know this does not sound nice, but ladies, do not think or react to this emotionally. Just stop and think. Just stop, because what I'm hoping I can get you to do from this session is how to think like a man. Not permanently, but just so that you understand how you can navigate the journey of life whilst you try to achieve whatever dreams you have in relation to relationships. Now, about 80% of our happiness will come from our relationships. And the whole feminist movement and telling women that, you know, they can do it all by themselves and that they do not need men is one of the most calloused teachings I've ever heard in my entire life. You know, interdependence is such an important thing. You need women, need men. And I won't go into that in any more detail, but we need each other. All of us need each other. Each of us needs someone to complete us, and someone to support us, and someone to be there. And the best way to get that person and to secure that love in your life is to understand how the opposite sex thinks. The mistake I've seen over the years is women listen to other women in relation to relationship advice. I wish more women would listen to men to understand how we think. You know, we think very differently. You know, men, we think in straight lines. Women, you think more in circles. You're more emotionally attached to your feelings. We're more rational and logical in our approach. But that's just how we are. That is who we are. Don't reject it. Welcome that difference and use it to your advantage. Now, let me conclude today's session by saying this. I'll go back to Caitlin. She's 36. Sorry, 39. You can see from everything I have explained, from a sexual marketplace value, my conclusion was she has a very low value. From reproductive value, she has a very low value because she's gone past geriatric pregnancy. She's gone past 35, high risk. She's 39, going on 40. Most men who want a family will not even consider her, except that the men want to have no kids, or they're happy to adopt, or except the men have kids of their own. That is a session I should do, so I can explain how to extrapolate and how to work the numbers, so you know how to play the game. So, but the point being that you can see that Caitlin has a challenge ahead of her. Now, she might have a very high economic intrinsic value, but at 39, and let me use a good example. If there's a man who is 42, he wants to have a family, he has no kids of his own, he's never been married, and he's looking to choose a spouse. He has a plethora of all the women between 18 up to Caitlin's age. Why would he choose Caitlin over a lady who is 25 or 26? She comes with a much higher reproductive value or fertility value. She comes with much higher sexual marketplace value. Why would he choose Caitlin? She might be a great woman. Her non-sexual value might be very high. Her intrinsic value might be very high, but men are visual, so we look first. We judge based on what we see. There's an ancient script that says, that God judges. God looks on the inside and man looks on the outside. That is a profound but true statement. Men will judge based on what we see first before we get to know you. So if Caitlin wants to have more success, there is one thing and one thing alone she can do. She cannot change her age. She cannot turn back the hands of time, so her reproductive value is what it is. But there is one thing she can do. She can try to maximize her sexual marketplace value by ensuring that she's at the best weight for her height, by ensuring that she's fit, by ensuring that she's athletic, by ensuring that she's active, by ensuring that she's taking very good care of herself. Now, in conclusion, I noticed that Caitlin said something. She said that she had gone to seek therapy, which is a good thing to do. However, the issue, in my perspective, is not necessarily failures from her experiences with men. It's really a lack of experience with men. I would recommend that she needs two things. She needs to work with a personal trainer, someone who can design a program to get her in the best physique possible so that her sexual value increases. And number two, she needs to also work with someone who is able to who's able to, like a matchmaker, someone who can match people, because there are men out there who would value the non-sexual value much higher than the sexual value. But you need to know how to find them. Dating apps are not for women, in my opinion, from 30, I believe from 30, in my opinion, and this is a sensitive topic again, maybe I might do something on this, but women who are from 33 and above, dating apps are not for you if you're looking for a serious relationship.